We're going to be covering very advanced physics and very advanced mathematics and concepts and esoteric symbolism and things like that involving the new movie Interstellar. This is going to be a spoiler alert. This is going to be somewhat of a lengthy video, but it's, like I said, it's going to get very in-depth to the underlying messages and the truth behind the movie Interstellar. So let's check it out. The reactions from the crowd after watching the movie, it was just, everyone was stunned and, you know, just basically, you know, jaw on the floor, had no idea what, you know, to make of the of what they had just seen. So struggling to grasp the message being conveyed in the movie. So, and it had many paradoxical implications and very deep and profound spiritual foundation as well of the whole concept. So in the movie, Dr. Mann says Dr. Brand's equations couldn't reconcile quantum mechanics with relativity.
The equation couldn't reconcile relativity with quantum mechanics. You need more. More what? More data. You need to see into a black hole. The laws of nature prohibit a naked singularity.
Finally, is that true? If a black hole is an oyster, then the singularity is the pearl inside. The gravity is so strong, it's always hidden in darkness, behind the horizon. That's why we call it a black hole.
Okay. If we see beyond the horizon, we can't. There's some things that aren't meant to be known.
The movie kept showing that he could only solve for half of the equation and couldn't solve the problem of gravity.
Trust me. I'm going to find us a new home. By the time you return, I will have solved the problem of gravity.
And that his attempts were with one, nay, both hands tied behind his back.
For years we've been trying to solve the equation without changing the underlying assumption about time.
And?
That means each iteration is an attempt to prove its own proof. It's recursive, it's nonsensical.
Are you calling my life's work nonsense?
No, I'm saying that you've been trying to finish it with one arm, no, with both arms tied behind your back. I don't understand why.
Another plan, can we take this point up at another time? I want to talk with my daughter. Stepping out into the universe, we must confront the reality of interstellar travel. We must reach far beyond our own lifespans. We must think not as individuals, but as a species. Do not go gentle into that good night.
The reason for this in reality is because their math isn't able to survive intact beyond the singularity. Thus the fallacy that information never escapes the gravity of a black hole. This is not the case when considering things like vortex-based mathematics and the obvious toroidal structure of this universe, where light, or information, simply comes right back out the other side, as a white hole.
Are we missing one person? Oh, yeah. Gotcha. Okay, so here we go. We have the vortex. We ready? Okay. A vortex is compressing and it's decompressing. Okay? This is it going in at the top, coming out at the bottom. Remember the gold, the emanations. This is what everyone else lost and forget. Every physicist, every scientist, every mathematician didn't remember that right there. Okay? There's something driving this thing, and it's coming out of the center. It's a higher dimensional energy. The universe can be quantified in whole numbers. The number 9 is the spindle around which everything revolves diagonally in logarithmic spirals. So there's the number 9 shooting out in multiples of 7. A tornado is more powerful than a nuclear bomb. What devastated Kauai but a tornado? Okay, which is a vortex. Now the reason I did this is that a tornado is based on the word toroid. Okay, and our body is called a torso. And that's what we're modeling as a toroid. This is called a toroid coil. Okay, and this is called toroidal pinch, where it gets very small in the center is a toroid. Now the universe, they say a black hole disappears into nothing, but a black hole turns into a white hole. It decompresses out. Okay? Here's the Earth's magnetosphere in a toroid. Okay? These are all based on a vortex. Okay? Now, this is called a funnel. Are you having fun? And there's the dandelion puff principle. How the universe reprocesses itself, because I'm saying it's an ecological system. It comes out the nozzle, the jet, which is right through here. Nature's hourglass. And decompresses, okay, and these are toroidal field coils, and decompresses and purifies, and it comes out again, all over again, to continue the process. Okay? Time ratchets is forward. These are just other things I put. Okay, so let's look at a toroid. I'm going to ask you to be our new assistant. Yes. Would you please spin that and make that into a vortex?
Do you have to stand up? Spin it?
No. No, he'll do it. No. There you go. Okay, get it going faster, 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 faster. Okay. Okay, and stop. You just start, move your hand, move it only in the center. There you go. There is your tornado, there is your vortex. It's compressing, going through the singularity where the energy shoots out from, and going out the white hole, and it'll come back and go again in a closed loop cycle that's ecological. And that's how the coil is made. But it's not made like this. It's made almost straight lines around the invisible 9 that it's spinning around the vortex. Yeah, I'll show you how to do it real fast.
You should just drink water before you drink it.
Yeah, no, a lot of people sell machines that do that. So there's... They do that. In fact, they make a machine that costs $40,000. They say it puts back the life energy into the water.
You just gotta shake it up.
I'm explaining a vortex and how it works. Now, the vortex is driven by the emanations coming out of the center. You can see it clearly in the pulsing of thirds. 1, 2, 3. The thirds intersect in a harmonic, a timing. It's like musical harmonics. And that's how I keep the electricity from having friction and having random collisions. I think you're about to discover some new things that are...
Everything you should know.
Okay.
It's like nothing new.
Here's your 396s in the center. See your 396s always in the center? Remember I said we leave it alone? 396, 693. It flips. First it goes 396, and remember I said it flips, 693? Here's your 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5s going in. So this is one winding. Here's the other winding going out, 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5.
Oh, and then there's the space in between you were talking about.
And if you put these both together, okay, you get this guy, which is the skin of the toroid. Because here you have doubling down, 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5. Here you have doubling up, 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5. There's your 3, 9, 6, 6, 9, 3.
Okay.
This and those two ingredients make this. In fact, everything you're seeing is all one and the same. The numbers never move. I'm just giving you zoom views, cross-section views. I'm giving you outer surface views. But what I did was I superimposed, I interlaced the undercarriage, so then that you would have a matrix from which you can tile, from which you then can decorate your environment, so that you can then navigate and move about, and move around in it. Because that's what this whole thing is. It's a navigational map. It tells you how you go anywhere in the universe, up and down, know what's going on in the universe. It's the secret of the gyroscope. It's these numbers, this everything. The number 9 is the source of the gyroscope, and everything's spinning around 9. Okay, everybody ready? So I'll explain to you how it works. Now, remember we were going to say that it is a... Okay, so you now see that this is the skin. So these tiles really get bigger and smaller. See how they're longer here and wider out here? But here I had to make them just like a grid cloth to keep it simple. Okay? Otherwise they would have been getting bigger. Okay? By the way, this cheesecloth is very important. Again, there's no horizontal or vertical line. It's all diagonals, like our symbol. That's why in relativity everything's a warp and curve. Remember I said time follows a logarithmic spiral of the doubling circuit? Everything's diagonal, not time on our third dimension, not a bullet shooting, not light. Nothing can be horizontal or vertical perfectly. Even a photon behind the eclipse of the sun was seen to curve. A photon coming from a distant star proving that relativity existed. Okay, so here again, we are looking at, so when they do math made out of horizontal, vertical lines, you get a quad rule sheet of paper and you calculate things, that's totally false. Because if you get a quad rule and you put it diagonally, everything diagonally, it's not squares, it's diamonds. When everything's a diamond, then you can pick up your calculations, you can go off that end, and you can go through a hole and come back out the other end. And you can actually be the torus. Does everyone follow that? Okay, I'll show a picture of that too. Everybody can say, no, I didn't follow that. But this is what it looks like. This is what I mean going through the hole. Okay, so on diamonds, you can go off the page this way, and you're really coming back in around, and you're coming back out the other end.
Are you making a virtual reality of all this information so you can kind of get inside it?
It's something you can do.
Okay.
Okay, we need someone to do this.
You said you don't want to get left out.
No, actually it needs to be modeled on a computer, because that way you can see when you start with the number how the energy vibrates. When you have a motion here, it goes over to there. You're going to have fun on that when we get to that, showing vibration and motion. Okay, so everything's spinning around the 9. Why? Because the eton magnetism, that invisible field, is displacing everything, creating the vortex. Okay, and you have the doubling circuits, and they come around, contract. So, I think we'll start right now on that vibration that you'll have fun with, and that energy. You know? You would have liked that anyway. That's dealing with the letters in the name of God in harmonics. And they all have numbers. Okay?
Mathematicians call this pattern the torus. The energy in a torus flows in through one end, circulates around the center, and exits out the other side. It's balanced, self-regulating, and always whole. I was first officially introduced to the torus by scientist and inventor Arthur Young. Futurist Dwayne Elgin explains how the torus is the primary pattern that nature uses for life at every scale.
Evolution means to unfold, to roll out. So the question is, what is the universe rolling out? And what the universe is rolling out is self-organizing systems, and you can see this at every scale. A self-organizing system is a technical term for just a system getting a hold of itself, knowing itself, essentially. And if we go to nature, we can look at and we can see these self-organizing forms throughout. We can see it in the cross-section of an orange, the cross-section of an apple. We can see it in the dynamic nature of a tornado. We can see it in the magnetic field around the Earth, a similar magnetic field around an individual. We can see it in the structure of an entire whirlpool galaxy. We can see it in the structure of a small atom. At every scale, throughout its entire history, the universe has one single project. It's growing toruses. The universe is a torus growing factory.
These toroidal dynamics are visible at various scales. One of them is at the galactic level, which are huge spinning structures with billions of stars in it. Looks like typically big arms of galaxies spinning around, and they have vortices that goes from the center out to the edge of the galactic halo that surrounds them. Stars move from this galactic disk out to the halo, down the vortices, and back out again. Stars like Arcturus, for instance, we know have done that path already. That's the appropriate description even for the atmosphere of our planet. The weather goes from the North Pole down to the equator and then back up, from the South Pole up to the equator and then back down. Even the dynamics on the surface of the sun are very similar. Of course, here we're looking at it from an external perspective on a small scale model. When you look at the solar system embedded in the galaxy, embedded in the cluster, embedded in the supercluster, we're traveling in this boundless sea of infinite torus flow.
The torus is like the breath of the universe. It's the form that the flow of energy takes at every scale of existence. But there's also an underlying structure in how the flow fits together, sort of like a skeleton. It's called the vector equilibrium, a term coined by one of the 20th century's greatest thinkers, Buckminster Fuller. Inspired by Fuller's visionary work, I spent decades researching the dynamics of the vector equilibrium and the torus. I became so excited by the potential of the toroidal energy form that in 1997 I co-founded a multidisciplinary think tank called the Sequoia Symposium to study the pattern and explore its applications. Our collected research convinced me that the torus and the vector equilibrium are primary patterns, fundamental to the creation of the universe at all scales. At the Sequoia Symposium gatherings, I learned of inventors who claimed they were using the torus dynamic as the basis for devices that generated energy without combustion. This revolutionary development Accessing what's sometimes called zero point or radiant or free energy is now being called most simply new energy technology. Given that so much of the suffering in our world is the result of lack of access to energy, I realized that free, unlimited, clean energy would be one of the greatest breakthroughs in history. It could not just improve, but actually transform the quality of life on this planet. So I began to wonder who else knew about this pattern or about this powerful potential energy source. Some of the scientists at this symposium showed me how the torus has been encoded by different cultures for millennia. Apparently, ancient cultures had embedded this code in the most enduring forms then possible, in stories, in icons, in alphabets, and buildings. Here we are at one of the world's oldest sacred sites, the Osirian Temple at Abydos, Egypt.
Very little writing is found in the Osirian Temple. However, there is one very significant piece of information in that temple. It is a very faint but clear and precise drawing. It's not etched into the rock, it's not carved, it's burnt into the atomic structure of the rock in some extraordinary way.
Nassim has decoded the Osirian symbol in 3 dimensions. Since our world is not two-dimensional, it makes sense that codes relaying information about our world also wouldn't be limited to flat designs. His 3-dimensional version of the Osirian symbol starts with the vector equilibrium, a perfectly balanced force field with 12 equal energy lines radiating out. They stabilize its center like the 12 spokes of a wheel. The primary pattern of balanced energy flow around this structure is the torus. Here we expand to the next larger scale with a total of 64 pyramids called tetrahedra. If we then put spheres in representing the toroidal energy field surrounding each of the pyramids, and then we drop away the pyramids, we end up with a matrix that is, amazingly, an exact overlay for the Osirian icon, a 3-dimensional model of the same pattern that was burned into the rock wall of the Egyptian temple thousands of years ago. Now we travel across continents, from Egypt to China, where the same geometry appears at another sacred site built in 1420.
Then you go to the Forbidden City, where the sun gods reside, and where you find at the entrance the Fu dogs, the guardians of the knowledge. They guard the knowledge under their paw.
The same geometry of 64 energy units is encoded again. I started wondering, is it just a coincidence that the exact same design appears in significant places on 2 different continents? But then Nassim showed me that this geometry of 64 is encoded time and again in cultures across the centuries and from all over the world. The Hebrew Kabbalistic tree of life creates the same structure we just saw, with the vector equilibrium again embedded at every level. The ancient Chinese system of wisdom called the I Ching is based on 64 hexagrams, symbols with 6 lines in a set, some continuous, some broken. These can be put together as the 6 edges of a tetrahedron, and together would form the 64 tetrahedron crystal. This same pattern shows up in modern scientific research. The double helix has an alphabet of 64 codons that are used to encode our human DNA. I had seen that there was advanced knowledge of the living geometry of the universe thousands of years ago, but how on earth did they know about it?
Most of the stories of ancient Egypt and Mayan and Incas talk about sun gods coming to the earth and teaching them engineering and writing and all of their science. I started to wonder if all these sun gods were not advanced civilization coming from another part of our galaxy. These texts and many ancient cultures describe them as coming in flying boats, or in the Vedic tradition, flying machines, and so on. There is many mention of these sun gods coming through time.
Could these early pilots from beyond our world be the ones responsible for sharing the knowledge of this code? Could they actually be tapping its power to propel themselves through the cosmos? This isn't where I thought my research would lead me, and these notions were rocking my world. But Nassim has impressive evidence to back up his theories, and I could see no other rational way advanced math and physics concepts would have been recorded over 3,000 years ago. I sought out one of the most knowledgeable investigators, Dr. Stephen Greer, the founder of the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence. He's conducted hundreds of interviews with top-ranking government and military witnesses.
And so when we talk about extraterrestrial intelligence, we're talking about civilizations that have reached the point of being sentient like we are, but whose technologies and perhaps social capabilities are such that they've been able to become interstellar or interplanetary civilizations. And when you look at the fact that the most conservative estimates are in the Milky Way galaxy that there are at least 10,000 Earth-like planets that have intelligent life on them, and that at least half of them are likely to be as advanced or more than ours. It's almost a certainty that there's intelligent life out there that have mastered the laws of the universe beyond what's currently taught at MIT and Caltech, to be able to transfer through space-time in real time through vast distances of interstellar space. We have over 4,000 cases where these objects have landed on terra firma and left physical evidence. We have over 3,500 pilot cases. We have hundreds of cases, including ones from the highest ranking investigator at the FAA, John Callahan, and numerous other operators where these objects have been tracked on radar going tens of thousands of miles per hour or dematerializing and then reappearing in another point in the sky.
Yes, there have been ET visitation, there have been crashed craft, there have been material and bodies recovered.
We have contact with aliens not originating from some foreign country, but from some other solar system. And I have been a party to that.
There were documents that I have seen that refer to the Roosevelt having several instances of UFO flyovers, and particularly after they took on board nuclear weapons. Now, my SEAL told me, Jordan, this, what have you got in your log? This never happened.
The crew going on duty and the crew coming off duty all saw the UFO just hovering in midair. It was a metallic, circular object, and from what I understand, the missiles were all shut down. That means they went dead, and something turned those missiles off.
Now, remember, all this stuff is flying at several thousand miles an hour. So this thing fires a beam of light at the warhead, hits it, and then this thing flies up like this. Meanwhile, we're all going like this, fires another beam of light, goes around like this, we're going like this, fires another beam of light, goes down like this, fires another beam of light, and then flies out the way it came in. And the warhead tumbles out of space. The feeling at the time was that it must have been extraterrestrial. They took the film and they spooled off the part that had the UFO on it, and they took a pair of scissors and cut it off. They put that on a separate reel, they put it in their briefcase, they handed Major Mansman back the rest of the film and said, here, I don't need to remind you, Major Mansman, of the severity of a security breach. We'll consider this incident closed.
But who do you tell that you were involved in a UFO incident without them looking at you like you ain't wrapped too tight.
Out of all of the evidence for the existence of UFOs, one extraordinary phenomenon continues to astonish and inspire me. The appearance throughout the world of so-called crop circles. These elaborate designs appear mysteriously swirled into crops of grain in such a way that the stalks are bent over, yet remain alive. More than 5,000 of these patterns have appeared in over 30 countries, most of them in England. The media has led many people, including me at first, to write these crop patterns off as hoaxes, the nighttime work of a few pranksters. Of course, there have been faked versions, but those made by human hands are crude compared to the vast majority of these elegant creations. Could hoaxers have created all 5,000 of these patterns? Could a few people with ropes and boards have created something as complex and beautiful as this one, made in the dead of night in a driving rain and leaving no footprints in the soil? The electromagnetic field over the area where the crop's been laid down to create the image is often electrostatically charged. Some of these areas are littered with strange magnetic particles. One of the most amazing crop designs is not a circle, but a rectangle that seems to be a direct response to a message sent out into space in 1974. The message was a radio signal depicting our planet's location in our solar system and Earth's people, in hopes that it might be received and interpreted by an extraterrestrial intelligence. 27 years later, in 2001, this crop design appeared in England, along with what could be a self-portrait of the sender. This message matches the format of the NASA signal and describes a different solar system from ours, a picture of the sender, non-human DNA, and a microwave antenna they apparently used to communicate, rather than the radio antenna that we used. The antenna symbol had appeared a year earlier in exactly the same field, right next to a working radio wave antenna, like the one NASA used to send out the original signal. NASA continues to officially deny extraterrestrial contact of any kind. And yet, year after year, these spectacular creations appear. So what might these remarkable designs mean? Here are some two-dimensional versions that seem to be revealing the torus in 3D. Here is the vector equilibrium. And the related pattern of 64 that we saw encoded in the arts of so many ancient cultures. When I saw the coherence between the crop circles and the ancient encodings, I thought regardless of whoever created them and wherever they're from, there must be an important purpose to these designs. They're so coherent. I've come to believe that the pattern of the torus and the vector equilibrium, especially in the form of the 64 tetrahedron crystal, is showing us how energy works in the universe so that we can learn to align with it. I believe that they're giving us a model for accessing energy in a clean, safe, and limitless way, and a new means of propulsion. What more important message could there be to get to us, and especially now, from their perspective, as we're beginning to extend our careless reach beyond our planet? I got further confirmation of this notion when I met Dr. Jack Kasher, a former professor of physics at the University of Nebraska, who has also researched UFO phenomena. Presenting at a Sequoia symposium, Dr. Kasher showed a remarkable series of drawings by a woman named Lane Andrews, who claimed to have been invited onto an extraterrestrial spacecraft. I was startled to see her detailed sketches of the toroidal energy field that she said propelled the vehicle and protected the passengers. I subsequently interviewed James Gilliland. James has many hours of UFO footage from his ranch near Mount Adams in Washington State. He also claimed to have gone on board an alien spacecraft. What blew my mind was that he had never met Lane Andrews and had no knowledge of her experience, yet he described a phenomenon that was amazingly similar: numerous ships with spinning rings of light. Could it simply be coincidental that James and Lane described the same torus dynamic, and that both of these people have been harassed extensively by government and military agencies? To some, the idea of UFOs may sound crazy, and yet from another perspective, it is completely plausible.
The Earth is about 4.5 billion years old. That's 4,500 million years old. What if there's another planet that's almost exactly like us? Almost exactly. 4,501 million years old. They're a million years ahead of us. And on a galactic scale, they're almost our twin brothers. So where are we going to be in a million years? We'll have solved all these problems, and there's another way, whether it's wormholes or warping space. There's got to be a way to generate energy so that you can pull it out of the vacuum. And the fact that they're here shows us that they found a way.
This is a major shock to the human system that is in process. I understand why people in our generation, people who aspire to positions of political leadership, etc., never dare go near that question, because it's a worldview challenge. It's a fundamental worldview challenge.
So here we are, a relatively immature species struggling with possible self-destruction. If aligning with the torus does hold the key to a new form of clean, safe energy access, imagine the implications. This could be the most important technology breakthrough of our times. So who wouldn't want to have an energy source that's unlimited and freely available? That turned out to be a key question, and that's what led me down the next rabbit hole. It turns out that scientists as far back as the early 1900s have been developing alternative ways to access electricity without combustion. Nikola Tesla believed he had tapped into what he called radiant energy. Many scientists believe he was accessing what's now called free energy. But before Tesla could finish the project, his financier, banker J.P. Morgan, who had a monopoly on the copper used for electrical lines, recognized how Tesla's invention could transmit electricity without wires. He then shut down Tesla's funding. Tesla's lab was burned down and he was ostracized, all for trying to implement his vision of unlimited energy for everyone. A modern-day inventor, Adam Trombley, was inspired by Tesla's work and by the possibilities of the torus. Trombley built a dynamo, a direct current generator that accessed electrical power right out of the air.
We were trying to demonstrate that by mimicking the magnetic field of a planet and rotating this device, we could actually create a dynamo that would work. And in fact, it did work, and it does work. So when we contemplate nature, when we contemplate Jupiter, or we contemplate a dynamo like the Earth rotating in space, we're basically talking about a magnet which is rotating in space. And the lines of flux of the magnet are pouring down and through in this toroidal pattern of the magnetic field. It's also expanding and contracting. It's breathing. It's taking in the energy of space literally and transforming it. Right here in this toroid, we have enough energy to transform the entire Earth. And that's not just a theoretical statement, it's literally true. To contemplate the implications of this means that every single place on Earth suddenly has power. Every single person on Earth suddenly has power. We have universal abundance.
Trombley had been invited to demonstrate one of his generators at the United Nations and the US Senate. But these events were undermined by the first Bush administration. Then the device itself was taken in a government raid. Trombley's experience isn't unique. Almost every time I found an inventor with a promising new technology in the field of free energy, he told a similar story of suppression. Inventor John Bedini began working with Tesla's theories of radiant energy decades ago and has produced an assortment of battery charging devices that generate more energy than it takes to run them. He announced that he was going to start offering them at low cost. Soon after that, he was attacked in his lab and warned not to produce the devices. For his own safety, he had to let go of marketing free energy. These are all devices from labs I personally visited.
Now,
Now, the quality of this footage is obviously poor, and I'm not expecting this to convince you. My point is that being there with these inventors, accompanied by experts, and seeing these new energy devices in operation convinced me that the technology is real. And the implications of that to me are absolutely thrilling. Canadian John Hutchison not only created some free energy batteries, but also used Tesla's theories to counter gravity, to make objects float. This could revolutionize the field of propulsion. His lab was raided and equipment was taken by police and government officials in 1978, 1989, and again in 2000. One of the scientists we were going to interview for this film was Dr. Eugene Malov, an engineer from MIT and Harvard, and editor of Infinite Energy magazine, which covers both theoretical and technological developments in the new energy field. Dr. Malov was mysteriously beaten to death in 2004. If these inventors were all hoaxers and charlatans, I wondered, why are they being suppressed so consistently and so brutally? I asked free energy inventor Adam Trombley why he thought this technology was being suppressed, and if the UFO phenomenon was related.
we've had major military people at great risk to themselves say, yes, these things are real. Why do you think the military-industrial complex doesn't want that statement to be made? Because you start thinking about what kind of technology is behind that. That's the bottom line. The suppression of UFO phenomena is hand in hand with the suppression of so-called free energy.
The energy is extracted from the fabric of the space around us, which means it cannot be metered. That is a direct threat to the single largest industry in the world, energy. It's goodbye ExxonMobil, goodbye oil, goodbye coal, goodbye linear transmission of electricity through power lines, all that gone. Unfortunately, it's someone's $200 trillion piggy bank. The proven oil and gas and coal reserves are worth north of $200 trillion. This information coming out would completely change geopolitical power more than anything since, well, in recorded human history. And it would happen in a generation.
I started to examine the breakthrough solutions, and much to my surprise, these concepts have been proven in hundreds of laboratories throughout the world, and yet they have not really seen the light of day.
Rather than smashing things together and trying to control the explosion, these new technologies rely on blending, of dancing with what naturally is. The common denominator of all the free energy devices I've seen is that they mimic in one way or another the torus energy shape. You don't have to believe in free energy technology to be concerned about the repression of ideas and inventions. I found myself thinking, what better way to justify our dependence on oil, coal, nuclear, and other dangerous and dirty technologies than to claim there are no better, cheaper alternatives? It was my beloved wife and creative partner, Kimberly, who kept bringing me back to the human implications of my scientific research.
For me, as intriguing as the torus and ETs and free energy are, the most compelling question was, would understanding these things really help alleviate human suffering in any way? And it turns out it can. So much of the pain on the planet has to do with the lack of access to energy. Can you stay warm? Can you get food and water? Can you get hospital care? All that has to do with energy access. If there is a fundamental pattern, which makes sense to me that evolution would be efficient in that way, and we can align with that pattern to create new technologies that will solve these problems, then it's worth it to me to open my mind to these socially taboo subjects.
If the new energy technologies were to be set free worldwide, the change would be profound. It would affect everybody. It would be applicable everywhere. These technologies are absolutely the most important thing that's happened in the history of the world.
So given the stakes, I decided to ask who's benefiting from suppressing scientific research? Whose wealth and power are threatened by access to clean, free energy? Who has a motive to set up a world where so few have so much and so many have so little? As an independent researcher, I followed one of the cardinal rules of investigative journalism. If a story doesn't make sense, follow the money.
And this model solves for the grand unified field theory and does reconcile quantum mechanics with the other forces of physics.
I want to talk about Nassim Haramein's recent paper on the Schwarzschild proton, which was not only accepted but chosen by a panel of 11 peer reviewers at the University of Liège in Belgium to win the prestigious Best Paper Award in the field of physics, quantum mechanics, relativity, field theory, and gravitation. This significant paper marks a new paradigm in the world of quantum theory, as it describes the nuclei of an atom as a mini black hole, where protons are attracted to each other by gravitation rather than some mysterious, undefined, strong force. This radical new view of the quantum world produces a unification of the forces and appropriately predicts measured values for the nucleons of atoms. It begins with the quantum vacuum density, which is a measured 5.16 times 10 to the 93rd grams per cubic centimeter. Then we calculate how much vacuum energy would exist inside of a proton, which has a radius of 1.32 femtometers, multiplied by 4/3 pi r cubed to get the volume. A density is mass per unit volume, so if you multiply a density by a volume, the v's cancel to give the amount of mass that would be contained within a proton volume, which is 4.98 times 10 to the 55th grams, which also happens to be the mass of the entire universe, existing inside each and every proton. Nassim also believes that this is evidence of an ultimate entanglement of all protons, which he mentions briefly in his paper. Just think of every single proton inside every single atom in your body connected through the vacuum to every other proton in the universe. We then calculate what proportion of the total vacuum energy density available in a proton volume is necessary for the nucleon to obey the Schwarzschild condition for a black hole, where the radius of our black hole is now 1.32 femtometers, the radius of a proton, and we solve for m. The mass needed to obey the Schwarzschild condition for a proton radius of 1.32 femtometers is 8.85 times 10 to the 14th grams. Haramein then uses this mass to calculate the gravitational force between two contiguous Schwarzschild protons using the semi-classical approach. We yield a gravitational force of 7.49 times 10 to the 47th dynes. If we then calculate the relativistic velocity of two Schwarzschild protons orbiting each other with their centers separated by 1 proton diameter, we get 2.99 times 10 to the 10th, which is also equal to the speed of light. This essentially means that the protons inside of a nucleus can be thought of as black holes orbiting each other at the speed of light. A fascinating concept. If we then calculate the period of rotation of this system, we get 5.55 times 10 to the negative 23 seconds, which also happens to be the characteristic interaction time of the strong nuclear force. So apparently the strong force is actually quantum gravity at work due to the black hole nature of the Schwarzschild proton. Now it turns out if we plot every object in the known universe onto a logarithmic scale of mass versus radius, we find an approximate linear progression. Oddly enough, the Schwarzschild proton sits almost exactly on this line, while the standard model proton sits far outside, suggesting that the standard model is incorrect after all. I also liked how Nassim showed how one can obtain similar results by using the proton volume to Planck volume ratio multiplied by the Planck mass to get the same result of 4.98 times 10 to the 55th grams, the entire mass of the universe inside every single atom. This is important because the Planck length relates directly to the Fibonacci number and phi golden ratio, which is a key mathematical element in all self-replicating systems. The question is, what is replicating itself, and why? The answers to these questions and more are coming.
This model is a self-regulating unified whole as portrayed in all the ancient spiritual sciences. What the movie portrays is that ultimately the science cannot be reconciled without the existence and the inclusion of spirit.
You want to follow my heart? But maybe we've spent too long trying to figure all this out with theory.
You're a scientist, friend.
So listen to me. When I say that love isn't something we invented, it's observable, powerful. It has to mean something.
Love has meaning, yes. Social utility, social bonding, child rearing.
We love people who have died. Where's the social utility in that?
None.
Maybe it means something, or something we can't yet understand. Maybe it's some evidence, some artifact of a higher dimension that we can't consciously perceive. I'm drawn across the universe to someone I haven't seen in a decade, who I know is probably dead. Love is the one thing we're capable of perceiving that transcends dimensions of time and space. Maybe we should trust that, even if we can't understand it yet.
Have you ever had a dream, Neo, that you were so sure was real? What if you were unable to wake from that dream? How would you know the difference between the dream world and the real world? This can be what? Be real?
Living, feeling, being in love.
Love you, Jody.
Growing old.
I love you.
So many things I still have to do. Other side. Another world. universe. Being with Aiden and those I've loved forever. There's a world out here. A whole universe of forests and lakes and mountains and rivers. It's all around us. You just have to listen carefully to hear its whisper. Neither heaven nor hell. There's no God or devil. Just a place where we continue to exist after we die. My soul explores it endlessly, and I've still only seen a fragment of it. I can be everywhere and nowhere. I can dissolve into nothing, but become whole again. I can merge my soul with others, or be more alone than any human being has ever been. All this is possible merely by the force of my will. I continue to look through to your world. I watch over those I love. I'd like them to know I'm there, that I'm okay. To hold them in my arms one more time. Tell them how much I miss them. But I have to settle for being close by. Invisible. Transparent. No more than a fading memory. I know what has been and what is yet to be. I know all the possibilities. I can see the darkness coming. I must stay a while longer. There is still a part to play before I can leave to discover what lies beyond.
Sometimes, I can spend hours staring into space, watching the images as they go by. They play over and over again, like a TV that's never turned off. I don't know why I'm seeing all this, but there's one thing I do know. It all really happened. When I'm alone, I listen to the voice inside my head. She talks to me. She says there are things I need to know. Sometimes I shut my eyes and it's as if I could fly. I can go through walls. I see beautiful colors around people, and I discover faraway places without ever leaving my room.
This is what creates the tesseract cube of time-space, placed within a 5-dimensional reality as portrayed at the end of the movie. So at one point during the movie, I had a very profound realization, and I said, holy shit, this is exactly everything that I had written over a year ago. In what we may wish to call the beginning, we were already so far evolved that we were literally infinite creation, infinite beings. We created ourselves in our own likeness through the universal laws of the golden ratio 1.618, through these fundamental laws of infinite creation, number, mathematics, and sound. In what we may think of as our past, in order to experience the illusion of evolution back into our true selves as infinite creation, in what we perceive to be our future. It is then that we remember that we created ourselves, and we also create all that exists in this manner. Everything that has ever been created and ever can be created already exists right here, right now, in this moment, simultaneously, within our true self. The omnipresent infinite creation, the Ouroboros, because we can think of it as the past and the future. And when you warp that, as in the movie, you warp that, it comes back around. Time is cyclical. It is in cycles. Just as in the movie they portray the wormhole being 2 points in space, the past and the future, and they rejoin to connect, to become one. And of course, time is not two-dimensional. So when you, instead of being a sheet of paper, you fold it and it becomes spherical. And the wormhole becomes like a worm through an apple, going from one point to another, infinitely, parallel to each other.
Is there any possibility? Who knows? Some clever way we can maybe how much in a black hole for getting back in years. Don't shake your head at me.
Time is relative. Okay, it can stretch and it can squeeze, but it can't run backwards. It just can't. The only thing that can move across dimensions like time is gravity.
Okay. The beings that led us here, they communicate through gravity, right? Yes. Could they be talking to us from the future?
Maybe.
Okay. If they can.
They are beings of 5 dimensions. I think that time might be another physical dimension. To them, the past might be a canyon that they can climb into, and the future, a mountain they can climb up, but to us, it's not, okay? The Cooper, I screwed up. I'm sorry. But you know about relativity.
My daughter was 10 years old. Couldn't teach her Einstein's theory to go like that.
Couldn't you have told her you were going to save the world?
No.
Now we have the Rosetta mission to Comet 67P Churyumov-Gerasimenko, and the ESA scientists are once more left scratching their heads in confusion. The comet was much rougher and more oddly shaped than anticipated, and when the Philae Launder bounced off the surface, it was admitted by team members that we failed to explain the rebounds, and the higher strength material was a surprise to us. The firm belief that comets are primordial and the source of the water on Earth requires that our eyes are deceiving us. As one of the Philae team said, it's rocky-like but not rock. Such is the selective blindness induced by prior beliefs. There is an opportunity for the Rosetta mission to fulfill a far greater purpose than merely establish a myth of planet formation, because if Comet 67P is a rock, it is telling us two fundamentally important things. First, it tells us that our belief that comets formed the planets is wrong, and that the reverse is true, the planets formed the comets, because rocks and clay, also found by the Stardust mission in comet dust, require planetary processes in their formation. And second, the low density of the comet, measured by its gravity, tells us that we don't understand gravity or the structure of comets, or possibly both. The electric universe model has comets born of planets by electrical discharge, which overwhelms gravity by many orders of magnitude. And in a simple garage experiment, it was found that the discharge melted hematite powder used to mimic the red dust found on Mars, and formed spheres like those found in abundance in the Martian soil. Significantly, some spheres were found to be hollow, and some joined in pairs to form a dumbbell shape with a narrow neck. So Comet 67P may be hollow to some degree, which isn't possible according to the standard model. But perhaps of most significance is the implication for basic physics and our understanding of nature and the universe, because nowhere will you see it acknowledged by physicists that they don't understand why matter has mass. In fact, the confusion extends to textbooks and encyclopedias, where the words mass and matter are used interchangeably. Wikipedia is explicit, and I quote, "Mass describes the amount of matter in an object," end of quote. But one of the key messages from the equation everyone knows but no one understands, E equals mc squared, is that mass is a property of matter, and that therefore it is an energetic variable. I should mention that no physicist can define energy in terms of the nature of matter. You will read of its classifications, conversion from one form to another, and its conservation, but its physical nature in matter is a mystery. Our fundamental ignorance is complete and exposed in this simple equation. So the mass of the comet cannot tell us how much matter it contains. If it looks like rock, it is safest to assume that it is rock. We have had plenty of forewarning after visiting a large number of comets and asteroids and finding it difficult to distinguish between them by their appearances. Yet we believe asteroids are rocky and comets are not. It's become a modern myth. This is shocking news. We can't therefore say what stars and planets are made from. Modern cosmology is revealed as another mythology dealt to us by a new age of astronomer priests. Rosetta is sending scientists a stark message. When astrophysicists use mass in their equations, they don't know what they're talking about. That's why we have the Big Bang, black holes, dark matter, dark energy, and weird neutron stars. And looking for the origin of particle mass via a hypothetical Higgs boson is futile and a colossal waste of resources. Both particle physics and cosmology are a theory-laden, computer-generated fantasy land. Each discipline has led the other on in their wild speculations. We have wasted a century on both of them. So it remains to be seen if Homo sapiens ignoramus can decode what Comet 67P, this modern Rosetta Stone in space, has to tell us.
Scientists are celebrating at the CERN laboratory in Geneva tonight after the announcement that theoretical particles they dreamt up on a blackboard in the 50s might possibly, could maybe, be worth billions more in funding and jobs for the boys. The "God, I can't believe it could cost this much money to only possibly find something," particle, or Higgs boson, is a tiny subatomic particle that gives credibility to fantasy theoretical physics and myopic gravity universe cosmology. To find out more about the theoretical theory of the theoreticians, we asked one of the leading scientists at CERN to tell us where all the money went. Thank you. Most of the universe is empty space, except for the 99.999999%. That's plasma, electromagnetic fields, electric currents, and stuff we don't pay much attention to. So, it's all empty space, man. Honest. Which is a shame, because our bizarre mathematical model of the universe requires much more stuff than there actually is. And I mean much more, man. Way more. Our sums are just not a bit off, dude. We're missing 80% of the fucking universe, man. So, we decided it was full of Higgs bosons. Easy as that. Well, there you go, just like that. And after 50 years and billions and trillions of dollars later, we think we might have found some. I know, astounding, isn't it? Well worth the Nobel Prize. What new things have we learned? Well, we've learned there may be things about our theories that might be or might not be correct. It's a great day for theories about physics and discovering that we might have found something that has been very lucrative for us. In fact, if it wasn't for theories like this and others like the Big Bang, black holes, dark matter, dark energy and so on, scientists all over Earth might well have to definitely find something for much less money. I think, given the scale of what we might have possibly maybe discovered, the billions and billions it cost have been very, very well spent. And I mean that literally. It may now be possible to predict with great accuracy the funding of billions of dollars more projects looking into theories of what things might be. Yes, it's a momentous day for things that might be or probably could be. So, we shall now look for particles that are worth much, much more money. In theory, at least. Why?
Have you ever wondered why we're destroying our beautiful planet and ourselves with it? At first, the answer to this question may seem an impossible riddle to solve, but in reality, all you need to know to answer this question is that a technology can be based upon life or death, implosion or explosion, compression or decompression, gravity or levity, love or hate, fire or water. The technologies used in our modern world have been intentionally chosen by the entities that are controlling our society in order to enslave the human race to their death machines and cause us to destroy every living thing on planet Earth, including ourselves. To justify this, they have promoted and glorified the highly sensory-based and theoretical academic science taught in universities today. The academicians brainwashed at these universities would have you believe that the universe has a beginning and an end, a big bang to create it, and a gradual heat death to destroy it. However, these statements are poverty consciousness lies that have been fed to the academicians of the world by their deluminated masters. In reality, the universe is eternal, and if we choose to create a technology that harnesses the forces which cause the universe to work eternally, we will be able to create a society based upon life rather than death, and free ourselves from our current slavery to the military, industrial, banking, agricultural, medical, and energy corporations who have engineered the sheeple society in which we live today. A reality of limitless free energy, invincibility to all disease, and infinite abundance can be realized for all of humanity if that is what we demand. If you'd like to join me in creating this utopian reality, hit subscribe right now and share this video. I want to say a special thank you to Robert Ote and Matt Presti, and invite everybody watching this video to check the links below to see their respective websites.
Whoop. Oh.
We are so far evolved that in the same way we create artificial realities in virtual computer simulations, so too is our physical reality, just a larger scale computer simulation, a holographic or self-similar universe created by our further evolved self, as explained in the movie, where we created the wormhole to allow our own interstellar travel through that wormhole, and thus access to the information from our future evolved selves, and then to feed it back through the closed loop cycle of the black hole back into the third dimensional physical construct, the matrix of reality.
It's this. I don't care Saturn. A disturbance of space-time. There were appeared 48 years ago, and it led to another galaxy. No one knows how it actually occurred, but
someone placed it there.
They.
Whoever they are, they appear to be looking out for us. That wormhole lets us travel to other stars. Get more friends we needed it.
They put potentially habitable worlds right within our reach.
And once that information circuit is completed and the information is obtained from the singularity and fed back through the black hole, they close the tesseract, where we then find Cooper floating in space outside of the orbit of Saturn. Closing the tesseract. Out through the hexagonal portal, beyond the orbit of Saturn, through the North Pole. After being sent back through the portal located on the North Pole of Saturn, being the hex or the tesseract cube, the time cube, the portal to this, the gateway to this third dimensional reality matrix, which in ancient Hermetics, it's well known that Saturn is the keeper of the physical realm. Beyond Saturn, it is the intangible realms of spirit, because Saturn is literally the last planet visible to the naked eye, to the physical eye. So therefore, that is why Saturn is the keeper of this physical reality. He is known as Old Father Time. He is being the time tesseract, the cube, Saturn's symbol being the cube and the hexagon, which can be found on the North Pole of Saturn. So the movie is showing us literally what has occurred in the past and what is occurring with our own evolution as a species, with the soul's evolution. The movie is portraying these esoteric concepts.
Maybe instead of looking for a fundamental particle, we should start looking for a fundamental principle of division. We should start looking for a fundamental pattern of creation, because if we understand the pattern, we understand the principle behind the identity. Now we have the key to creation, the key to universal forces. I found eventually that the key was geometry. In a boundary is the possibility of infinite division, and thus infinities and finite structures are complementary. If our universe is expanding, then there must be something contracting, there must be some compression happening in order to get expansion. There must be a feedback between the expansion and the contraction. And the fact that we could start to see the information feedback loop between the radiative side and the contractive side starts to open a whole new field of physics. So basically, Einstein said, gravity is the result of space-time curving like the surface of a trampoline. What we say in this paper, yes, and when space-time curves, it doesn't just curve, but it curls, just like water going down the drain, and that generates spin. And that's the source of the spin of all things. Now, when you look in nature, you can see these dynamics. Taking these principles and applying them to yourself, you could start to visualize, you could start to imagine, you could start to experience that maybe within the confine of the finite structure that you're in is the potential of infinite division, the potential of infinite amount of information. You're transferring that information through your boundary to the infinite of the universe within yourself. Everything we see in the universe is just division of that energy density of the vacuum in various scales. The biological resolution is the link between the large and the small. You are the event horizon. Instead of seeing yourself as an insignificant little dot that means nothing to the universe, you start to see yourself as the center of creation. Everyone else is the center of their universe as well. And thus, we are all equal, and we're all one.
Now the scene where Dr. Mann is essentially trying to kill the entire crew in order to preserve his own existence can be likened to a global scale for our species and where we find ourselves right now. And we can liken it to when a person is drowning and a lifeguard goes out to save that drowning person, and the person drowning is struggling to preserve their own survival to such an extreme extent that they will even kill the person who is trying to save their own life in the process.
Do you see your children? It's okay. They're right there with you. Did Rebecca tell you that poem before you left? Do you remember? Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and reign the close of day. Rage is the diamond light.
And so the lifeguard will have to knock that person out in order to save their own ass, because of because of the person who is clinging and grasping and struggling for their own life to such an extent that we can liken this to the global, to our species at this point in time right now, is that there are certain ones of us on the planet who, due to our own lack of understanding of our own eternal nature of spirit, our own eternal connection to spirit, through the lack of understanding of that, there is a group of people, a very select few group of people, who are literally taking the rest of humanity down with them, because they are desperately grasping and clinging for their own survival. So they are struggling and taking the rest of humanity down with them due to their own lack of acceptance of their own demise, and the fact that we have an eternal soul, an eternal spirit that transcends this physical reality, that transcends this physical body, this vessel that contains the spirit, that contains the consciousness within it, and is literally just a habitat suit it's an interface in order to traverse this experience, and in order to touch, to feel, to taste, to smell, to take in all this observant information and to relay it back to the eternal spirit, to the eternal source. So we are literally the probe being sent into this reality in order for that reality to experience itself directly from the inside.
Somehow, part of the package of being a living, thinking being is that you get a universe inside of you. You know, you get a galaxy-sized object inside you that you can access. And there are the mountains, the rivers, the jungles, the dynastic families, the ruins, the planets, the works of art, the poetry, the sciences, the magics of millions upon millions upon millions of worlds. And this is apparently who we each are. We're a little bit of eternity sticking into three-dimensional space, and for some reason occupying time in a monkey body. But when you turn your eyes then inward, you discover the birthright, the existential facts out of which this particular existence emerged. In the past 100 years, as these super technologies have been developed in the West, the smashing of atoms, the invention of radio, television, computers, immunology, so forth and so on, data has been arriving about the practices of Aboriginal cultures all over the planet, that they dissolve ordinary realities, ordinary cultural values, through an interaction, a symbiosis, a relationship to local plants that perturb brain chemistry. And in this domain of perturbed brain chemistry, the cultural operating system is wiped clean. And something older, even for these people, something older, more vitalistic, more in touch with the animal soul, replaces it, replaces the cultural operating system. Something not determined by history and geography, but something writ in the language of the flesh itself. This is who you are. This is true nakedness. You are not naked when you take off your clothes. You still wear your religious assumptions, your prejudices, your fears, your illusions, your delusions. When you shed the cultural operating system, then essentially you stand naked before the inspection of your own psyche. Desmond Morris called it the naked ape. And it's from that position, a position outside the cultural operating system, that we can begin to ask real questions about what does it mean to be human? What kind of circumstance are we caught in? And what kind of structures, if any, can we put in place to assuage the pain and accentuate the glory and the wonder that lurks waiting for us in this very narrow slice of time between the birth canal and the yawning grave?
Back from our initial probes. We sent probes into it. We sent people into it. 10 years ago. The Lazarus missions. You sent people out there looking for a new home. The Lazarus fields. That sounds cheerful. Lazarus came back from the dead. Sure, we had to die in the first place.
And for those of us that know our mythology and the correlations, the story of Lazarus from the Bible comes from the more ancient story. It's just a repetition of the older story from Egypt of Osir, who was Osiris. So Lazarus is El Osiris. And Osiris was slain and had gone to the underworld, which is representing the winter season when it goes to the underworld, and then he was resurrected, which is the same story as Lazarus.
12 possible worlds, 12 Ranger launches, carrying the bravest humans ever to live.
Okay, so in the movie they send 12 people representing the 12 disciples, and as well as the 12, which are the 12 houses of the zodiac, who follow the sun through the cycles of the year. So they send the 12 disciples through the black hole, and which was called the Lazarus mission.